afternoon, everyone. I hope you are doing great. Um, so, uh, Today we are going to start with an important part of our Introduction to Human Resource Management course, which is analyzing work, also designing a job. So, before we go into the definition, uh, we start with the workflow. Okay, so uh, we all know that work is always in any organization is should be planned, as we talked last session in chapter one, and should be analyzed, should be planned, should be organized. So this is where today's topic begins. We start with something called workflow. So workflow means the sequence of activity that must happen to produce any service or product. For example, in a restaurant, imagine in you are working in a restaurant. So the process started from the taking the order and then preparing the food and then serving it, right? So finally, you can receive in payment. So these steps together from the workflow, this is the form of workflow of any type of restaurant. So once the organization understands this flow, it can not leave actually everything unorganized. It must divide the work. So here, so this is the workflow. And if you move to the job, so we can define a job as a group of duties that are similar. For example, we go back to the restaurants. All waiters in a restaurant are doing similar tasks, like taking orders and serving food. Also, for example, serving customers. So this is called a waiter job. Okay, but organizations don't hire a job, they hire people. So that's why we go on one step deeper into something is called position. Position is the duties that performs by one specific persons. So if you have 5 waiters, we have one job, but 5 different positions. Why? Because each person represents one position. So organizations first design the workflow, and then they divide it into jobs, and finally assign with the one an individual position. So this is called the foundations of human resource management and organized work. Any questions so far? Good. So we move to developing a workflow analysis. So we understand what is the workflow. So now we have to know how organization actually analyze this workflow. Why? Because it's not enough to just say these are just steps. So human resource managers need to study these steps carefully. So this is what we call developing a workflow analysis. Because every organization looks at work in 3 main parts. The first one, input, and the second one is process, and the third one is output. So this is very important model. So just try it and imagine it as a system. Let's start with the input. Input meanings everything that goes into the system before the work starts. For example, in any organization, we need raw input. It could be materials, could be data, could be information. So imagine in a university, Input could be student, right? Or course materials and information. But in a restaurant, it could be rice or meat or vegetables. So based on that organizations, you can identify the raw input. Also, input includes equipment. So what tools or what system are needed? For example, a restaurant needs oven and kitchen tools, while a university needs a classroom or projectors and online system. So also its input could be human resource. This means the knowledge, also the skills and the ability of the people that doing the work. For example, a chef must knowing how to cook, and a lecturer must knowing how to teach, and etc. for each of the task of human resource. Okay, so these are the input. It could be, as we said, it could be human, it could be equipment, and it could be the materials and the data informations. So now we move to the second part, which is the process. So the process mean the activities or the task that transform input into something useful. So for example, in a restaurant, the process, as we said, include the preparing food and cooking and serving. University include teaching and explaining and giving assignment, evaluation and assessment. So this process is the second step to developing a workflow analysis. And finally, we reach the output. So if you go back to the output, the restaurants, so the output, it could be the product or the service. In a restaurant could be preparing meal. In university, the output is educated student or graduates. So human resource does not stop here. So it also could be measures these output. Is the food good quality, or are the students learning effectively, or are customers satisfied? So this is very important because organizations always want to improve performance. So after your product is ready, you have to assess, you have to evaluate. So if you see here, you can see that the all things connected together, everything connected from the input to the output. So organizations take input and also transform it to the process, and then go to the produce output. So this model help human resource managers understand where the problems happens, and how to improve efficiency and how to design the better job. So these are at developing a workflow analysis. So we move to workflow design and organization structure. So organization are not just tasks, they are people that working together. So inside any organizations have a different unit and different individuals that must cooperate to produce the final output. For example, in a university, lectures, administration, and IT staff and management, they all need to work together. If they don't cooperate, the systems, of course, will fail. So organization needs something to connect all these people and activity in a clear way. So this is what we call the organizational structure. Because structure means how we arrange people, how we arrange jobs and departments so they can collaborate effectively. And there are different ways to design these structures. So let's look at the most important ones. First, we have centralized structure, and the second one decentralized, third one functional, last one product or customers. So let's look at the first one, centralized structure. So in this type, decision making is connected at the top level, usually top management. So in this type of structure, employee follow instructions, but they don't have much authority to make a decision. So this is called centralized. All authority, usually top management. On the other hand, decentralized, in this type, decision making is spread across the different level. Like employees and departments, they have more authority and flexibility. For example, a department head may decide how to teach a course and managing students without asking the top management every time. So this makes the organization faster and more flexible. And another important structure is the functional structure. Functional structure, when the organization is divided based on the functions or specializations. For example, having we have a different type of department, like having a human resource department, having the marketing department, finance department. So each department focus on its own expertise. So this is very common in many organizations. And finally, we have the product or customer structures. So here, the organization is divided based on products or the type of customers. For example, a department for corporate clients having a department for individual customers. So the main idea here is workflows show what work needs to be done, but organization structures show how people are arranged to do that work together. So there's the differences between the workflows and organizational structure. And we move to job analysis. So at this point, human resource is not just looking at the organization as a whole, but going deeper into each job. So this is what we call job analysis. Job analysis, if we define, we can say that it is a process of collecting detailed information about a job. When human resource managers analyze a job, so they usually produce two main outcomes. First, job descriptions and also job specification. So these are very important because when you're talking about the job descriptions, this is focused on the job, not a person's. What does the job involve? So it includes things like a job title and job positions and where the job is located. Also explain the duties and responsibility, like what task the employee must do and who they report to. Like also include machines or the tools that uses and working environment. For example, uh, is it an office job, or does it require to working outside or using the special equipment? So these are related to the job descriptions. But job specification, so this is different because focus on the persons. As we said, job description focus on the not focus on the people, focus on the job. But job specification focuses on the persons, not the job. So include education level and work experience and skills. So we also define the type of training required. For example, does the job require someone patient, or does the job require someone creative or able to work under pressure? So the job description include teaching course or preparing lectures, also assessing students and working at university. But the job specification include having, for example, a PhD degree, having teaching skills and communication skills. So these are differences between job descriptions and job specifications. So job descriptions, what the job is, and job specifications, who the person should be. So this is very important because all students worry about the job description and job specification. So when we talking about the job description, this is a list of what a job involves, like including task, including the duties and responsibility, which is usually called TDRs. So when HR create a job descriptions, they are answering one main question: what exactly will this persons do this job? So a task is a small and a specific activity. For example, answering email or preparing slides. But a duty is a group of related tasks. For example, communicating with students, including answering emails, and responding to questions and giving feedback. So this is a task and duty. But responsibility is a broader. For example, ensuring students' learning is a responsibility. So if we talk about the lecturer job descriptions, job title, of course, will be lecturer. Locations could be university or institutions. And report to who? Of course, lecturer should be report to head of department. And if we briefly describe the description, we can say that the lecturer is responsible for delivering lectures and supporting student learning and assessing academic performance. So this is the descriptions of the lecturer. But the duties and tasks different. So preparing lectures, answering student questions, assessing student and evaluating, and the responsibility overall ensuring that effective teaching and student academic development. So this is a job descriptions for the lecturer. I just make it example so you can see with the any other type of job. So we clearly see the structure and what is the duty and what is the task. Um, any questions? Good. But job specifications, as we said, if you remember, the job descriptions focus on what? On the job, what the person does. But now we shift our focus to the persons. So, what kind of person is able to do this job successfully? This is what we call job specifications. We can say that it is a list of the knowledge and skills and ability and other characteristics. We call KSAOs. So the knowledge, we all know that when what a person knows, right? So it is the information that required to do the job. And the skills, how well someone can perform a task and develop it through the practice. So this is the skills. And ability, this is more general, and when per person or anyone naturally has or develops over time. But the characteristics include the certifications or license or even personality traits. For example, being patient or being responsible or having a positive attitude. So these are related to the what? To the job specification. For example, if the university looking for a lecture job specifications, having someone or lectures that they have the human resource management certifications. So these are a job specification. And now, after understanding job analysis and we talked about the job description and job specification, so there's one very important question: why is all of this so important in HRM? So what is the importance of job analysis? So job analysis is the foundations of almost everything in HR. So called the building block of all HRM functions. That means if a job analysis is weak or unclear, it means that all other HR activity will also be weak. So from the recruiting till developing. So let's think about the recruitings. How can a company attract the right candidate? If it doesn't know what the job requires, it uses job analysis to understand the job and then announce it properly. And then based on that recruiting, so comes selections. How do we choose the best candidate? And we compare the applicants based on the job specifications and skills and knowledge and educations and also the ability, because without job analysis we don't know what to look for. And then what is comes next? Next is training and development. If employees are missing any skills, so how do we know what training they need? So again, job analysis tell us the required skills so we can design the right training program. Also from the performance appraisals, how do we evaluate employees? Based on what? We use the job descriptions. So the task and the duties to measure the employee is perform well or not. Also, another activities or the functions of HR, it is compensations. So why do some jobs get higher salary than others? Why? Because job analysis help us to understanding this complexity and responsibility and requirement of each type of jobs. So then based of that analysis, we decide fair pay. Also, one of the most important human resource planning, because organizations need to know how many employees they need and what kind. So this is depend on understanding jobs clearly. Also safety and health and security. Job analysis also helps to identify the risk in a job and how to protect employee for this risk. Even in a union relations, so job analysis important because it clearly defines the role and responsibility and expectation to reducing the conflict between employees, also management. So if we look at the big pictures, job analysis is at the certain or a center, and all other HR functions depend on it. So that's why job analysis is so important for human resource, because all the functions of HR depends on the job analysis. So this is one of the most important part of the human resource management. So one of the source is the incumbent. Is the peoples who are currently doing the job. So these are the employees who already hold the positions inside the organization. So now think about who understand a job better than the persons actually doing every day. So that's why incumbents are considered one of the most reliable source of the job informations. For example, if you want to analyze the job of the any other employees, so what task do you perform daily and what challenge do you face and what skills do you actually use in positions. So through this, HR can collect very realistic and practical information, not just the theoretical idea. So however, we also need to be careful. Sometimes incumbents may exaggerate their work or focus only on what they like or what they remember. So HR usually combine this source with the other source to get the more accurate results. So incomes, this is one of the way to collecting the information. So now we can see that we have the job analysis instruments. So these are the tools. We have 4 tools that we can use it to job analysis. So these tools or method help HR gather detail and standardized information about job. One of the most widely used tools is the Position Analysis Questionnaire or PAQs. So this is a structured questionnaire that includes many questions about a different aspect of job, because focus on things like the type of work performed and the level of responsibility and the use of tools, equipment, and the interactions with others. So instead of just asking a general question, HR gives employees a standardized form to complete. So this is make it easier to compare a different job across the organizations. And we also have Fleshman job analysis system. This is a bit more focused on human abilities. It analyzes the job based on the ability that required to perform them. Also, we have analysis, PIQ, as we talked before, focus more on the job task, also structure. But the Fleshman system focus on more ability needed by the persons. So if you look at here, you can see that, as we said, PAQs help us to understand what the job involves. But if you see here, Fleshman job analysis system help us to understand what abilities are required to do the job. So now we move to the competency model. So a competency model focus on the skills, also behavior, also abilities that employees must demonstrate to perform successfully in a specific role. So if you remember, job descriptions that focus on the task or Fleshman focus on the ability. But competency model combine both behaviorals and measurable performance expectation. So let's look at one of the examples, project manager. So organization and planning skill. So this is competency measure the ability to establish priorities and schedule activity to achieve the project goal, of course. So the proficiency rating is could be below expectation or meet expectations or exceed expectation. And also communication. So this competency measures the ability to build credibility and trust through open and a direct communication within internal, also external stakeholders. And proficiency rating could be below, meets, and exceed. But for the financial and quantitative skills, this competency measure the ability to analyze the financial information accurately and set financial goals that positively impact the company. Could be below expectations or meets or exceeds. So if we notice that how each competency is linked to a specific behavior and also includes a rating scale. So this make it possible to evaluate employees not just on they perform task, but also how well they perform critical competency for the roles. So these are the competency model for each department or for each competency. So as we said, for the project manager competency. So at this point, we have completed the job analysis part. So before we move to the next topic, actually I want to stop here. And the next part is job design. I don't want to mix both topics in one session. Job designs, I will record the job designs and upload it for you in a system, and you can watch. So then in our next online sessions on Monday, we will discuss both job analysis, also job design.